My name's Davina Shensky, and the title of this program is Live Without Limits, Reach Personal Success on a Daily Basis. And in this program, we talk about personal development, psychology, mental health, anything that affects you and keeps you from reaching your personal goals. Today's presentation is titled Four Negative Conflict Responses and How You Can Keep Yourself Out of It. Many people fear conflict, others thrive on it, but chances are conflict has caused a lot of anxiety and strife in our lives and the lives of those around us because conflict can often lead to such negative and destructive outcomes. We can often blame conflict itself to ruining our relationships, stability, or our lives. But it's not conflict's fault, it's us. The quality of our lives depends not on whether we have the conflicts, but on how we respond to them, says Thomas Crum. We are all so different, and those inherent differences will always lead to conflict. Compassion, empathy, and understanding can help keep those conflicts from escalating to prejudice or violence. We all want the same things in life: to feel safe, stable, connected, and cared for. But what that looks like and how we get there is where our paths diverge. And since we can't read each other's minds, we must communicate our needs and expectations without judging or criticizing someone who might be on the other side. And here is where things can get tricky and go very, very wrong. Most of us have responded poorly to conflict at some point in our lives, and we don't know how things blew up or broke down so quickly. But how you respond to conflict is only half the story. You can't control how others respond, but you can only try your best to steer the conversation back into a constructive territory. So here are four less than stellar responses to conflict and how to make sure that yours is healthy. Four conflict responses on how you can keep yourself out of it. Offense. Some people thrive on conflict and use it to fuel their aggression and air their grievances. They will take any opportunity to get involved in conflict and may create conflict where there is none. Conflict is a way to break up the monotony of life and get their blood pumping and that dopamine and adrenaline flowing. There, or rather, these people thrive on drama, and things can quickly escalate into harassment, threats, and violence. A healthy response, while conflict is a necessary part of life, it is not a way of life. It cannot be used to dominate, intimidate, or manipulate others. Remain calm, listen, and respond with care and compassion. Stay out of conflict whenever possible and resolve it whenever necessary. Defense. Conflict very often evokes a defensive response in people. In this case, conflict feels like an attack, and a natural reaction to attack is defense. but defensiveness can easily slip into dismissiveness, justification, and counterattacks, even if the basis for the conflict is inaccurate and the issues brought forth are not your burden. You still bear the responsibility to respond in a constructive and healthy way. Healthier response. Don't dismiss the other's concerns without addressing their merit or your role in the matter or lack thereof. Try not to justify your actions or words, inappropriate or not. Instead, acknowledge them in the way they come or could have been interpreted as negatively impacted the other person. Do not attack the other person, even if they are attacking you. It is hard to resist, but fire needs water, not fuel. Submit. Some people are naturally submissive and assume any conflict brought to them is somehow their fault. These people often take themselves responsible for others' attitude, misunderstandings, and emotions, even if they know they're not actually at fault. They will apologize anyway, just to appease the other person and smooth things over. This doesn't actually resolve anything and teaches the other person they can dominate others to get what they want and don't have to take responsibility for their role in anything. Healthier response. It is important to figure out what the actual conflict is about and delegate who is responsible for what. You know, and you can acknowledge your role while also holding others accountable for theirs. Make sure to note that everyone's feelings belong to them. And just because someone feels offended or put upon doesn't mean an offense has occurred. Sometimes nothing was done wrong and people still get hurt. Avoid. A lot of people try to avoid conflict altogether. They ignore the other sides and gripes bow out of conversations or in relationships just to avoid confrontation. This obviously doesn't help either. Ignoring someone can add just as much fuel as firing back at them. And the person who has a problem with you will always be the one controlling the narrative. Conflict cannot be avoided and doesn't automatically mean fighting or confrontation. There will be people and situations in life that you can't walk away from. So it is best to learn how to handle conflict now so you don't create more problems by letting them grow. Peace is not absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means, said Ronald Reagan, and you don't need to avoid conflict. Conflict is a part of life. It forces us to communicate openly. It exposes our deepest desires, fears, and biases. Conflict is not a negative we need to stamp out. It is a natural part of life that needs to be recognized for the good that it can be. There's no getting away from it, and it's best to learn to live in harmony with it. You can choose to use conflict as a tool of growth instead of shunning it. like a dirty secret. Keep your responses of conflict healthy and constructive, and try to recognize when you are straying. It can help, or rather, it can feel like a struggle, and the stakes can be very high. But at the end, you'll know where you stand and have a better idea of how to navigate your world. Now, when I think of conflict, we're going to come in contact with people that we're going to have conflict with. But there's a time for conflict and there's a time to diffuse conflict. And often in families, you find where conflict is the worst, especially when you have someone who's jealous of someone else in the family, or a parent that creates jealousy between the children. And they often, in essence, encourage that conflict. The thing is how are you going to deal with it? And how are you going to diffuse conflict when you need to?